thanks ever so much for inviting me today. What I want to do in the second part of this talk is really to tell you the story of some children's paintings, how I came by them, and to show you the paintings. So a lot of the talk will be taken up with actually going through the paintings. They were collected back in 1979 when I first came to Sri Lanka as a researcher and carried out research into ritual and artistic and craft traditions in the southern province. I was mostly resident in Akuresa. I suppose children's paintings I did wonder whether these were appropriate for a literary society, but I suppose my get-out clause there is that I'm actually writing a book about them. It's very much work in progress. So I've got a lot of things to tell you about the paintings, but I'm hoping that in the course of the discussion, you'll tell me some things about the paintings, some impressions that you get from them. But before we do that, some very important business. A few months ago, my very good friend Prasanna Kure passed away. This was after a battle with leukemia over quite a long period, and also not helped by the curse of COVID, which made all sorts of medical treatment far more difficult than they would otherwise have been. And it's my pleasure and a great honor to remember, to be asked to remember Prasanna as a man who contributed so much to the well-being of others. He was a doctor, he was a journalist and a political activist and an environmental activist. Could I just pause for 1 second? I just remembered that there's somebody I need to tell that I've started. Sorry about that. I first got to know Prasanna back in 2000 when I came to Sri Lanka to carry out a pilot study of a project that I was working on at the time about the reception of new reproductive and genetic technologies. I'd come across Prasanna's name as somebody who was very active in the field of medicine and health in Sri Lanka, and he looked like a very useful person to get to know, and this was absolutely the case. I was based in the Colombo Medical Faculty at the time, and Prasanna was a lecturer in community medicine, and he was incredibly helpful to me, and we struck up a close friendship. And whenever I was in Colombo, I would make a point of seeking him out, and we'd have one of our very long and winding chats. And suffice to say that I learned an awful lot from Prasanna. He went on to work in a variety of settings, including PANOS, an international NGO, and he worked closely with the legendary Carlo Fonseca. I knew Carlo a bit, mainly he was introduced to me, I was introduced to him by Prasanna, and Carlo was not somebody who suffered fools gladly, but he spoke extremely highly of Prasanna, both personally and intellectually. I'm a social anthropologist, and I think that the reason Prasanna and I got on so well was that he was also a social anthropologist of sorts. And what I mean by that is that he had a curiosity, a deep desire to understand the human condition and what was going on around him. He was not interested in just taking things at face value, but driven to inquire and to learn, often through first-hand experience. I remember on one occasion, he slipped into the conversation that he'd been a surgeon in the Sri Lankan Navy during the troubles in the north. And this struck me as quite odd, given his political disposition. And I asked him about this, and he explained, well, we hear so much about what's going on in the north, but it's difficult to know what is the truth. So I thought that the best thing to do would be to volunteer and go there and see for myself, which I think is a very admirable way to approach things in the world. One thing that I particularly admired about Prasanna was his capacity for hard work. I used to find his work rate absolutely staggering and humbling. He would open his surgery early in the morning, he'd go off to his day job, he'd come back in the evening and open up his surgery again. And if I was in town, I'd visit late in the evening and we'd have dinner and talk often till well after midnight. The dinner was cooked by Violet, his mother-in-law, a very lovely lady who sadly also died during the last year. I can remember some very scary three-wheeler rides from Dehivela in the early hours of the morning, my head full of ideas and questions that had arisen from our discussion in the course of the evening. But his work didn't stop there. He was a prolific journalist, writing regularly for the island, bringing to public attention information on medical matters and often highlighting issues in which public interests were not being best served. He also found time to fit in a sociology master's degree because he wanted to understand how society worked. He studied health economics, and although from a Christian background, he took a master's in Buddhist studies and was interested in Asian religions more widely. One of the last academic exchanges we had was regarding Buddhist ritual and its efficacy in the treatment of cancer, obviously something that was very close to his heart at the time. He also stood as a candidate in Colombo district elections. He was an environmental activist and a pioneer of Green Party politics in Sri Lanka. He was championing organic food production and a more respectful attitude to the environment long before this was mainstream concern. One really significant action shortly before he became ill was to research and write a book on the demise of the Singalaja forest, which I believe he presented to your group. Prasanna was a kind and empathic man with a strong sense of social justice. He was an inspiration for me, and I shall miss him, but nowhere near as much as he will be missed by his wife Shriyani and his two daughters Chatu and Parvi, who he absolutely adored. Right. What I want to do now is to move on to the story of the paintings. I went up. So, back in 1979, I went to Sri Lanka because I was interested in the study of art and ritual and healing and a whole range of things. And I found myself involved with and very closely connected to the Berava community. Now, the Berava are a caste. They're known as the drummer caste. They historically have been very much a low caste within the caste hierarchy and subject to quite a lot of prejudice against them. And it's quite a kind of an anomalous thing because the Berava are in fact a group who are the carriers of a major portion of the traditional art and crafts tradition of Sri Lanka, of Sinhala culture. And I became very much engaged, interested with the work that they did and spent over a year working in the southern province around Akuresa, following the activities of the Berava. Now, one of the things that they carry out is tovio and healing rituals, a whole range of different healing rituals, and all the skills that go with it. So that's not just drumming, it is dancing, it is gokkalava, making beautiful sculptures out of leaves, a vast repertoire of poems, kavi, that they use, and all of these are orchestrated in some incredible rituals. Now, as well as protecting people from the malign forces that exist out there in the cosmos, they are also believed to be responsible for doing some of the bad things that people draw upon to get revenge or to get justice. So I'm thinking here of Vaskavi, of Hunyam, of Kodivina, of all of these different practices that go on in villages where it was believed. I mean, Galilei Obe Sacred talks about how traditional systems, mechanisms for justice in villages have broken down, and faith in the judicial system and the police was not perhaps what it should be. So the space opened up for a whole lot of beliefs whereby people believe they could bring in the supernatural to achieve revenge. And I asked people about this, but of course, nobody ever was happy volunteering, owning up to the fact that they actually practiced these things, and they always pointed to somebody else. And one of the people who they pointed to as being very skilled in this was a caporala at the Getabaru Mahaviharia, further up the valley from Akuresa, near Kotapola. And the caporala there was very famous for the performance of Avalada. So I went to meet the caporala, and in fact became quite friendly with the caporala. And this caporala at the top ran a shrine at the top of Getabaru Kanda, the mountain. And he had a very special relationship with a god called Rajaro Bandara. And Rajaro Bandara, or Basnanga Devio as he is also known, was somebody who people went from far and wide to practice this avalada of gaining revenge when people had been wronged, and there's a belief that the god could actually bring justice. And as I say, I got to know the caporala quite well. And one of the things that the temple was becoming famous for was a major perahera. He claimed he had taken it from being a very small event to being a significant 3-day event, which had got, on one occasion, had 24 elephants. And this is always the index of the size of a perahera, is the number of elephants that are present in the parade. And he invited me to attend the 1979 SLLS perahera, which I did, 3 exhausting days at this magnificent event. Now, sometime after that, I was in conversation with a teacher who I knew, who was worked at the Kotapola Mahaviharia, and we were talking about children's paintings and how children saw the world and what have you. And I don't know who it was, whether it was me or him or together, we came with this idea of a children's art competition. And because the children lived close by Getabaru Mahaviharia, and because the perahera recently took place, we had this idea that why don't we just say we'll make the competition about our village, Festa Apegame Utsu, we'll make it about because they would all know about that. Many of them would have actually participated in it in the procession. So it seemed to be something that was nicely thematized. And I was interested to get at these ideas of art and production and how these children saw the world as a complement to the things that I was doing with the Beraba caste about ritual and drumming and so forth. So a competition was organized, and to cut a long story short, I ended up with 100 children's paintings, which were just simply given to me a few weeks later. I was disappointed that I hadn't been there to see them being made, but absolutely delighted that I'd got this treasure trove of children's images. I came back to the UK, put the paintings to one side, in fact, on top of a wardrobe, and almost forgot about them. But now I'm retired, I have a bit more time to do the things that I want to do. And I began to look at these paintings and thought, these are really, really special, and I want to do something with them. So I've now embarked on this project of writing a book about the paintings. Just to give you some very quick pointers as to the kinds of things that I'm interested in the paintings. First of all, I think there's something extraordinary about visual memory. This is a time when there's no television in this area. There was certainly no social media. Access to printed matter, to imagery, was not as available as it is today. So these children were working from memory. The second theme I think emerges from them is one of embodiment. The way that the children have captured the postures of the dancers, I think, can only come about because they themselves have an idea of the embodiment of the dance and of movement and so forth. The paintings have an extraordinary temporality. an image is atemporal. It's a flat thing when you look at it. But what these children have managed to convey is an incredible sense of rhythm and music and flow within the painting. Another interesting convention that I think is different from Western children's paintings is that of framing. We're very influenced by the frame and the subject at the center of the frame. An interesting feature of these paintings is that the children, they don't have quite that sense of a frame. And in many of them, there's activities that are going off the frame. So it does give the impression of, rather than focusing, that what we're doing is we're seeing something that is moving in front of us. Often there's an imagined depth to the painting. Children paint things which they can't actually see, but there's a hint at. So there'll be lines of people, there'll be lines of dancers, there will be flags and setters and so on behind. But it suggests that the children are imagining things that are out of vision, which I think is quite a clever thing. They also use outlines, and in Western art teaching, children are often strongly discouraged from putting strong outlines around things, whereas here the outlines are used to very strong effect. Many of them are painted on blank backgrounds. There's no attempt to position the subject within a situation or a background. And this is, I think, a technique that crops up in temple friezes in Sri Lanka. It's also characteristic of medieval art in the West, but the effect is to amplify the impression of the central subject. One of the things that I think is very beautiful about the paintings is the children's use of repetition, of the way in which bodies of dancers echo one another. Related to that is the way that the bodies are connected. This is a rather kind of possibly stretching a point, but I think that there is something going on in the paintings about the way that children perceive social connection, that the bodies are touching, their arms and legs are often interwoven. And I think this stays something quite significant about a singular sense of sociality, of positioning of people in relation to one another. Also, many of the paintings exhibit what I would think of as Asian beauty ideals of faces tend to be white, and the almond eyes in females, and also sometimes in the males. So it's just a very quick rundown of some of the things that you'll be seeing in the pictures, and I will draw attention to. But to a large extent, what I want to happen now is for you to just look at the paintings. I will give some sort of commentary on them. They are ordered according to the sequence of the Parahera, and I will give some sort of commentary on what goes on. I thought I'd just include a very nice quote from Martin Wickramasinghe here. Had children the verbal skills to express the joy they experience through seeing beautiful things, they would triumph over poets by virtue of their spontaneity. And I think that's a very apt quote to take us into looking at the paintings. At a Parahera, the crowds are often enormous, and here we have a painting of the crowd at a Parahera. There's a policeman in the front, trying to keep the crowd back, and there's a policeman to the side leading this young girl away. A couple of interesting features that arise in this. One is the very modern dress and hairstyles of the people. Remember, here we're talking about 1979, and also the significance of wristwatches, also something of a marker of status. Here's another one, which I'm just going to get rid of this. Another one which shows the crowds going hither and thither. And one of the things that often gets talked about at Paraheras and about the crowds is look out for pickpockets. And you may notice that the guy second from the left has got his hand in the pocket of the man in front, and the police officer is about to point this out. Also, the child's idea of deviant adulthood is perhaps suggested in the fact that the man is smoking a cigarette and has a beard. This is, I think, a very significant piece of work. As you will see, it portrays the lighting of a traditional oil lamp, which precedes any major festivity. It's curious that the lamp is divided in two. On the right-hand side, the side that is in the light, you have three young people all dressed in rather modern clothing, modern hairstyles, wristwatch, tie, fancy shirt, and so on. And on the left, you have the more traditional barefoot, sarong-clad, here's a drummer, in effect in the dark side of the oil lamp. Now, if you think about 1979, in 1977, Jayawardena was elected on a landslide and introduced neoliberal reforms on a major scale. And this was a period where there was a real tension between the idea of development, diunu, and the things that were holding back development, no diunu. And I think this young person here is playing around with these ideas of the future and what the future holds, and the modernity and consumption and commodities and so on that were beginning to be available in a way that they weren't pre-1977 and are now becoming available. And I think that this captures quite nicely the tension that was around at that time. Now, a very important aspect of the Perahera and what goes on is not just the religious side, but is the market, the pola. And all along the sides of the Perahera are market stalls. And I think this is a kind of quite a lovely rendition of the of people buying things at the market stall. It's in a style which you will see crops up again quite a lot, which is monochrome with figures that are quite cubist. And maybe I'll have more to say about the influence of the 43 group and George Cate later on. But I think that there is a definite conduit or channel in which modernist art influences are being fed into art education in schools. And this, I think, is in 1979, is the kind of a result of that. Also, before the Perahera starts, it's customary to have the Magalbera. And here you see four drummers. I think that they are Kandyan drummers because of the dress that they are wearing, and also the tapered drums are Gatabera, as opposed to the Yakbera, which is common in the south. And on either side of the drummers, you will see Punkalasa, the symbol of fertility. And the Magalbera is a set of auspicious drum sounds, a dedication to Buddha, which marks the beginning of any auspicious ritual. This is another painting of drummers. I suspect that these may be Berava drummers because of they're barefoot and wearing sarongs, and they're also playing yakbera. The other thing that makes me think that they are Berava drummers is the fact that in the middle is a child, and the way in which knowledge and skills are passed on within the Berava community is not through any didactic teaching sort of method. It is by having children participate in the adult world of ritual performance, and that is how they learn. And what we have here is a young person, obviously with two adults playing the drums. Now, when the police have cleared the way and the Perahera is coming, the first thing that usually appears are the Kasakario. the whip crackers. And the cracking of the whip in the Perahera is linked back to the original SLLS Perahera, and it's linked to fertility and the bringing of the rains. And the whips symbolize the lightning and the thunder that will come, and they certainly bring people's attention to events going down the street. Another episode that precedes the Perahera proper are the Guinea Boy Cardia, young men who perform incredible feats with iron metal rings, with balls of fire in them, and they roll and they twist and they throw them in the air. And here is quite a nice rendition of the Guinea Boy Cardia. But the 2 points here from my list of aesthetic things, one is the blank background, and number 2 is the half figure on the right. So there's a sense that we're seeing something passing before our eyes. Another feature within the procession are the Buru Kakukaria, stilt walkers. And this is one of a very young child doing quite a nice representation of the stilt walkers. And in the top right-hand corner, of course, they're marching along to the beat of a drum. Now, in this one, we see both the Kasakari and the Guinea Boy Kari at the front, and somebody bouncing along on a pogo stick. And just purely by coincidence, the other day, somebody who I know in Sri Lanka sent me a video of a recent Getabaru Perahera, and there was at the front a man bouncing along on a pogo stick, very, very like this one. So 45 years later, it is still being practiced. On the left, you have the crowds, and on the right, you have school children coming along with Seisata, the sunshades representing the sun, and the one at the back representing the moon. Here we have another one which captures the detail of the Perahera. And this one, I think, illustrates quite nicely this point about visual memory. I mean, there's extraordinary detail here, right down to the drumsticks that are being used to play the tamak, the round paired drums. They're played with kind of curly sticks, and you can see that they are playing them with those sticks. Of course, as you will know, the Perahera is modelled, most of them are modelled on the SLLS Perahera, which involves taking Buddha's tooth relic out from the Temple of the Tooth, and the local versions of it are like a fractal breakdown of these ones. And these are the relics that are taken out of the temple at on Getabaru Mountain, and the weapons of the different deities. And they're put on the back of elephants in this magnificent casket, Datu Karandu, and they are paraded round on the back of an elephant. And of course, the elephant has deep, deep symbolism in Buddhist culture, very, very closely associated with Buddha, his conception and his values and his capacity to remove obstacles and wisdom and so on and so forth. The Dhamma is believed to reside in the belly of the elephant, so very much revered. And then you have dancers following, a troupe of dancers following on behind, and then the school children from Getabaru Mahavidyalaya coming close behind them. This is a very young child, but I think what's very special about this is the quality of the painting of the elephant, of the drawing of the elephant. And indeed, I find it quite hard to believe that this child wasn't helped a little bit somewhere along the line with the drawing of the elephant. But anyway, maybe not. But even the 11-year-old has captured the karandua on the back of the elephant's back, and the crowds are watching the elephant pass by. This is another young child's rendition of the Perahera. You can see lots of detail in this, the different troops of dancers, most of which seem to be female, but you have elephants in it. and you have the groups making their way along the path. This is quite a colourful rendition of what's going on, and a nice detail here is the young people at the back carrying along a rather lethal electric cable from which are festooned various lights. And on the nights that I was there, it absolutely peed down. It was very, very wet, and how people weren't electrocuted, I do not know. But the nice thing about this one is I've made contact with a number of the artists, and Nandawati is actually now a teacher at the school, and we're in contact with Nandawati. So I'm speaking to her next week, and I'm very excited about this. Now, going back to this business of George Cate and the 43 group, Cate was very much responsible for throwing off the shackles of a Western, very painterly, easel-based tradition of art, and linking up Asian traditions with emerging modernism in Europe. And as I say, I think this has fed into many of the children's paintings. And here we have, I think, a very splendid cubist rendition of the Perahera, done basically in two colours, with the splitting of bodies and the the suggestion of volume by the alternation of dark and light. But I think it's a very splendid piece, and of course you can see the way that these sorts of images end up being followed through into things like batiks and t-shirt designs and so on. You have another kind of quite nice image of a group of dancers and drummers. You can see what's beginning to emerge here is this point I'm making about the parallelism of the arms and also the overlapping of the bodies. There's a sense that this is a group working together and moving together. This is quite a nice one, I think, which illustrates how, even at the age of 9, quite a lot of the details of the costumes of the dancers are in evidence. On the lower body cloths, the decorations and the necklaces and the hats with the cords, and the fact that they are spinning is suggested by the way in which the cords are thrown out, and also the way in which the cords around the waist are also flaying out. This is another one of dancers and a drummer, and again, I think this is for a 13-year-old, this is an exceptional rendition of a cubist, quite an advanced cubist technique. I think, again, it's just blank background, two colors, or a single color in multiple shades, and you can see the parallelism with the arms. This is a very definitely a group who are dancing together. Now, another feature of the Perahera is young men dancing the Calvary dance, and the Calvary is a relatively recent import associated with Kataragama and the taking of vows. And you can see the boy in the foreground has the lance, which is associated with god Kataragama, and the carrying of these heavy floral shoulder structures is linked with the idea of taking on a vow and meeting the vow. And again, consistent with a lot of the economic uncertainty that was opening up in the post-77 era, many people were putting their faith in the supernatural, in the gods, to ensure safe ventures. It was a very precarious time, I think. This is another one of a bunch of youths, again, modernist clothes beginning to come in, and they're dancing the Calvary dance. This one has got quite a lot of detail in it. It's got the Kawadi dancers, it has an elephant, it has a mahout with his rod for controlling the elephant and drummers. Quite a simple painting, but a lot happening, a lot of detail in it. I think the next couple are ones of dancers and drummers, but capture quite nicely the point I make about parallelism. If you look at the arms and the suggestion of the position of the legs, these are dancers dancing together in unison. And my point about embodiment is this isn't just done from visual memory, this is done from an embodied memory of what it is to be in those poses. This one also, I think, beautifully captures the parallelism of the legs and the arms, and obviously Malkanji's gone to a lot of trouble to paint the costumes with some detail. But you can see that this is another one where there's just a blank background, which really does throw out emphasize the bodies. Now, this is a troupe of Kandyan dancers at the festival, and what I think is very spectacular in this is the way that this 14-year-old has captured perfectly, I think, the posture of the Kandyan dancers in movement, particularly the one at the front. These, to me, seem to be perfect renditions of how a Kandyan dancer would be moving. I think this is one of my favorites, simply because of the simplicity. And if you said this is an early Picasso, I would probably have believed you. But I think it's beautiful just for the way the idea of, in such simple daubs of paint, the idea of a group of dancers and drummers in motion is captured. I think this one illustrates quite nicely what the point I was making about the way in which some of the bodies are framed. If you look, there's a kind of like what could be a very striking and distracting white border around all the figures. But I think what it does is it really emphasizes the figures. And again, you can see the beauty of the parallelism of the arms of the two dancers in the foreground. There's a repetition there which suggests this is not individuals, but this is a troupe of dancers dancing together. Again, a nice, I think this is called the Kalasanetu. Here you've got a group of young women dancing. But what I think is unusual and special about this is that it's not just about painting the dancers that are in front, but the painter also has an idea of what the dancers look like from behind and has included them. So there is, again, this sense of a group rather than the sense of a series of individuals. This is one, I think, which illustrates beautifully the point about the musicality of the imagery. If you look at it's a group of individuals, but the dresses, the cloths that they're wearing are beautifully integrated as a pattern. And also you can almost follow the line of the arms of the dancers in this Hevisi band as they come towards you. So the eye is all the time not settling on, the eye doesn't settle on figures, but it's all the time playing backwards and forwards across the pictures is a kind of a visual stimulation which renders the pictures with a strong sense of musicality and temporality and movement. Similar effect happening here. Again, you can see a lovely parallelism with the arms, the way that the arms are postured, and the colours dance. You go green, yellow, blue, green, blue, yellow, green. And the dancer on the right is halfway off the screen. There's no concern to have everybody fully on the screen. So you get kind of quite an ordered movement with the torsos and the arms and the heads, but the legs are quite confused, which give the impression that this is something's going to happen next. This isn't static. There's movement. They're in the process of dancing. Another, I think, beautiful image. This one almost looks like flamenco dancers, but you get this very strong sense of the integration of the arms, which gives a strong sense of women dancing together. This is another one of my very favorites. The two women on the left, I think, capture perfectly the postures of women doing a dance. I can't remember the name of the dance, but I've seen it many times where the it may be a winnowing dance or so. But I think that the postures of the women and the faces I think is absolutely superb. This is one of by an older, maybe a child, be a young adult, and the influences of Kate and the 43 group, I think, are fully in evidence here, with the beautiful spine, snaking spine of the one on the left, and the way that the arms are around the trumpet, and the exaggerated hand movements and body postures. I think is a very, very strongly influenced by that modernist art. Now, towards the end of the ritual, the Perahera normally ends with a gammadua, a large village get-together. And here we have just, I think, an episode from a gammadua, in which you have somebody wearing a devil dance mask, a yaksha, and they are dancing to the crowd underneath the shed or madua. This is another one which I think comes from the end of the ritual, in which the dancers make offerings to the deities who are believed to be housed in the shrine. And there's quite a lot of interesting detail in this. The punkalasa at the front, the brazier, in which incest is cast, usually sandung, which is wafted onto the images to convey the offering, and the metipahang, the oil lamps along the malyahana, the floral platform on which the offerings are made. And then at the end of the Perahera, the relics are parceled up and they're carried back to the top of the mountain. And this is the relics being carried back up to the top of the mountain to be stored for another year, awaiting the next Perahera. Now, that was 1979. I don't want to say too much more because I've gone on over my allotted 40 minutes. But one of the things that I find fascinating and very troubling is that these paintings were painted in 1979, and they convey a sense of childhood and the innocence of childhood and the excitement of those children living in that world at that time. Many of those children would have grown up into young adulthood in the troubles that covered the southern area, the southern part of the island throughout the 1980s, the Bishinya, the Terror, and Kotapola and Deniaya, Akuresa were very, very badly affected. So for these children, their childhood would have been very cruelly ended, and indeed many of them would not have survived. Many of them, even if they did survive, would have witnessed terrible things which no young person, no adult should have to live through. But that is what happened. And this is one of the things that I want to write a bit about in the book, is the contrast between childhood and the experiences that they then had. Work is ongoing. I've been very excited that we have been able to make contact with 10 artists, and we made contact with the school. And in fact, I'm going back to Sri Lanka in March. And the plan is, it's still work in progress, is that we're going to have a reunion of the child artists at the school, and also to run another art exhibition, because I would be fascinated to compare what imagery children produce today in a world that is flooded with social media and TV, and images are ubiquitous, to see what kinds of images are produced today. And that's going to happen, and that will be the last chapter of the book, is really bringing everything up to date. So that's me finished. And if you have been, thanks for listening. And I'll be happy to make questions or observations or whatever.
That was absolutely fascinating, and you caused such an interest in me to research a bit more and learn. And one of the things I would ask you to do, not now, but maybe through Ruan, send some links, web links to study this further. The question I had to ask you is, you might have said it, but I didn't quite get it. If you compare the art of children from different social background, different countries, is there a common theme related to how they represent things if they are, say, 8 years old or 10 years old or 12
Mm.
years old? Or is the 12-year-old Sri Lankan child very different from a 12-year-old British child who tries to show the same thing?
Yeah,
In relation to that, I get the impression that most of the children are they have a very fertile imagination, and they are actually, the art is more representational than reproductive. They are not trying to imitate what that person really looks like, but catch some features which would indicate to the person who looks at it, this is so and so.
yeah,
And on the same topic, what intrigues me is, if you look at children who are very young, say 2, 3 years old, if you ask them to draw, can you draw a picture of your mom and your dad? They'll draw just circles with dots for eyes and mouth,
yeah,
right? And they will indicate that dad by either putting a cigar in his mouth or a hairstyle or a frock or something.
yeah,
Now, when you tell them who is that, oh, that's dad. But if I tell him, yeah, but he doesn't look like it. Oh, he does. That's my dad.
yeah, yeah,
So it always intrigues me as to what they actually see, because what we see depends on us individually. What
yeah,
you see on an
yeah,
uh, artist drawing is not the same as me. I see the same thing, but the image I get and the
yeah, yeah,
connotation that comes with it is very individual. So I'm just interested to know whether, in general, whether children are better at representation rather than reproductive. And also the other, sorry to ask you so many things. I think, at what age do they try to delineate that there's a sexual difference between men and women? I noticed that some of the
yeah,
ones
yeah,
you showed, as the child gets older, the female breast seems to appear.
yeah,
But I'm not quite sure how they show the it's a man, apart from drawing a mustache or a beard.
yeah,
So whole lot of questions to you. I
yeah.
hope I made myself
Um,
clear.
no, absolutely fascinating. And I suppose the first thing that I would say is that I'm not an expert on this. I have the same fascination that you have about this. And I think a stab at something that connects all three bits of your question would be that there is quite a lot of work in developmental psychology about how children, that they first begin to incorporate perspective and volume, and these are maybe kind of common across developmentally, universal. So the kinds of things that you're saying about, a circle with a blob of it, that the head is the body, is everything. And then gradually there'll be a line comes down, that's the body. And then eventually there'll be arms and legs and so on. And the things are out of proportion. And I think that that's a kind of developmental thing. But what I think is very interesting, thing that I want to explore in relation to the paintings, is that I think that there is what happens is that we get socialized into a visual grammar. Yeah, we learn how to read images, and I can remember being realizing this many years ago when in Sri Lanka in in '79. I used to have when I was there. Of course, communication is very different from what it is now, and I used to have a photograph album of my family, and I had a picture of my niece, who was then about 2 or 3, playing on a beach. And I remember showing the photograph to one of my Berla friends, and he said, "Oh, that's lovely, but who's that?" And I said, "Who's what?" And in the top corner, there was a little tiny figure of somebody who was about half a mile down the beach. And I hadn't even seen this figure. And I think that is something to do with the power of photography to socialize our vision. And I think this is why I raised the point about embodiment, because it isn't, those children are very quickly beginning to acquire, possibly because they do dance at school. There's a very different kind of flow between different aspects of the curriculum, I think, in traditional Sri Lankan schools. That they do learn about music, they do learn about art, they do learn about dance. And these things flow backwards and forwards. So over time, I think the children I would see something and maybe represent it in one way. They would see it and represent it in another, because it's not just about a simple importation of a photographic image. It's about something internally imposing a structure before you even start. So it's about somebody's called it skilled vision, and I think that's I find that a useful way to think about it. That we all
Do you think that children are better at that than adults?
um,
That particular aspect.
I think it was Picasso who said something like, "We're very interested in how creativity develops in children, but never interested in how it dies in man." That we do. I mean, I think that's what Wickramasinghe was getting at, is that there is a sort of it's unpolluted, it's clear. Children can put things together in ways that maybe we as adults would struggle to, because there's so much clutter in our minds. We're so structured in our thinking. But I think. I mean, what do you think of the paintings?
The paintings were absolutely fabulous, and
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know whether they were selected because they were so good. If you look at 100 paintings, whether they'll all be really that quality, but and it's interesting the progression. You know, look at the age of the person and
yeah,
the drawing, and you can see how it sort of matures, if you like.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the choice of colors, the way they represented things, and George Keats used how that, and that was quite how it was influenced. But as pure imagery, they were absolutely fantastic. Some of
yeah.
them were breathtaking, to say the
Yeah, I,
least.
I, I agree. I agree. I'm glad you feel that, because I think they're very, very, very special.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think Jaika is going to ask you a question, but let me thank you again and tell you how much I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Bob.
Jaika.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Uh, Hi, Bob. Thanks very much for that talk. Actually, the quote from Picasso, I put it up in the chat for you.
All right.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't quite correct, was it?
Can you see?
Right. Okay. Got you. Thank you.
That's really what he said.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a sort of opinion about it as well.
Oh, I've lost it.
The fault that we have is we as adults try to teach children to be artists. They're naturally artists. I mean, I'm speaking from my own perspective as Now, if I think back about my career as as an ENT surgeon and subsequently a physician, is that perhaps I should have been an architect because for some quirk, I was not very good in maths, and both my brother and my younger sister were extremely good, and was a big disappointment for my parents. I was just horrible at maths, so I went on to do medicine. I'm a retired doctor. So very early on, I was quite skilled. I think my parents noticed that, and I was sort of given watercolors, crayons, and other stuff. Perhaps even as young as 3, 4 years of age, I can recall my sort of first paint set. And I remember also very diligently sort of trying to color pictures, these paintings. So very early on, I developed manual dexterity. And quite fortunately for me, there were, you know, if I was going in the line of being an artist, Colombo, middle class parents, we were sent to sort of art classes and that sort, and there were very few for children in the sort of Colombo, that sort of group. This is quite different from the village kids in the 1950s, 60s.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate in the sense I was sent to an Indian lady who had settled in Sri Lanka called Mrs. Cora Abrahams. I mean, she was like a second mother to me in time to come, because she would sit me basically next to her and show me lots of these art books collections that she had. Not only that, she had also had books of animals, the story about the lioness Elsa became popular. So she had all those books because children were interested in animals. So she had myself and a colleague of mine who also went into that line, Professor Saroj Jai Singh. I don't know whether you know.
Yeah.
He's quite a artist. He is the man who
I know Saroj, yes.
Yeah, the humanities directorate, the department in Colombo Medical Faculty. He and I were both contemporaries in the art school. So we were also taught by, well, in the sense, not taught, but guided by an artist called Lucky Senanayaka. He died about 2 years ago in Sri Lanka. He was a multi-talented person. He was actually an architectural draftsman. And I could show you some of my early paintings and contrast it with the paintings that I do now. You could see in the background some of my
Right.
I still paint. I mean, one of the other skills that I had because of my manual dexterity, during my internship, one of the surgeons said, Jaika, you shouldn't do anything else. You should become a surgeon. I think he noticed something about the way I held the scalpel. He said some other trainee would have just slashed with the knife and cut the veins underneath the testicle and caused a massive hemorrhage, because he threw me basically in the deep end to operate. And so really, that's what you learn. And the way I would judge these paintings that you showed, Bob, is when it comes to sort of valuing art, is the way I see it is what degree of emotion does that image or sculpture cause to the viewer?
Yeah.
And what are the thoughts that it would sort of perpetuate from that point onwards? That's how I judge it. So, I mean, I would say the selection that you have certainly does that extremely well. And I take your point as well. If I show you some of my paintings, I was influenced by the Cubists because there were a lot of books that Mrs. Abrams had on Picasso and Matisse and other sort of the Western modern artists at the time. And I was influenced by them. So if I show you how my childhood paintings are about the age of 12, you can contrast it with these kids who are probably influenced by George Keat, because certainly that there.
Yeah.
So I tried to replicate some of my childhood paintings after a long period. And it was actually quite difficult. Although I use the same colors, I now find myself very contrived and very slow. While as a child, you're very spontaneous. You know, you do things very quickly.
Yeah.
You just have that image and you convey it to the onto the canvas or the picture.
Well, maybe you could send some of the images that you're talking about, because I would love to see them. I mean,
And certainly could help you. I mean, if you want me to review what you have written and comment about it, or I'll be kind of be happy to do that, because I've retired now. I spend a lot of my time, uh, meditating and the Buddhist practice of meditation. I've been doing it diligently since 2019.
yeah. So where are you located?
Sorry,
Where do you live?
I live in the Midlands,
Right.
in Starbridge, actually.
Starbridge, right. Well,
Which is
yes, I mean, maybe through Ruan, I'll send you my email and we could strike up a conversation outside of this forum. I'd be very interested in that.
So as an adult, as a doctor, I did continue painting. There are some of my paintings in sort of hospital collections.
Uh-huh.
One I'm particularly proud about is the one that I have in the Royal College of Surgeons in London.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I still continue to paint, but although I'm not as prolific as I was.
No. Well, I don't think any of us are.
It's now. Thank you. I mean, that was a very interesting, very enlightening talk, Bob. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
Have we got any other comments, or Mahendra?
Sorry, I don't want to hog it, but just to tell Bob that one of the paintings that really struck me was the one with the lighting of the lamp, with the shades, white on one side, dark on the other side, young people, older people. I mean, that was amazing, because that's the kind of art which sometimes stimulates me a lot, because you can read a lot into it, and every time you see it, you'll see something different.
Yeah.
And the way I saw it was the dark means what's gone, and light means what's present. So to me it was present and past.
Yes,
So
yeah.
present image and the past images.
Yeah.
So that's one. Other one is talking representational. I'm sure you're familiar with the famous drawing of a pipe by Rene Magritte.
So it's the same positive peep or something.
That's right. The famous one. He said, "This is not a pipe." He drew a beautiful pipe, and underneath he put, "This is not a pipe." So what he's trying to say is that this is a representation of a pipe.
Exactly.
This is just a painting. It's not a pipe.
Yeah.
So people still talk about it. I find that intriguing, to
No,
draw
it is.
a perfect picture of a pipe. And
I
then puts
agree.
under it, this is not a pipe.
I agree.
So I'm wondering whether children are better at, I keep harping on the representational drawings rather than trying to draw what they see like photographic type of images. They are much more representational. When they draw lines here and there, which might seem haphazard, for them it has a much more meaning than we have.
No, I think that is absolutely correct, and this is it raises all sorts of questions about interpretation, about how far we can interpret. But what those pictures do for me is that they take you can stop at the level of representation and say this is what this picture's portraying and this is what it means. But what I think, as an anthropologist, what I'm kind of quite interested to try to pull out from these paintings are the way that these children are, because for these children it's not a pipe, it is not a parahera. What they're doing is that they're painting a representation of a set of relationships. And I think the one with the oil lamp, why I think that is such a fascinating painting, is that I think you can read out from the paint children's attempts to make sense of the world. Yeah, the world is not all fully formed. The world is, we as human beings are always in a state of becoming, and children are particularly in a state of becoming. So they're kind of trying to put all of this together. So there are little details in those paintings which I think reveal children's attempts to understand causality, to understand relationships between
Absolutely.
people, to understand connections, to understand social life, even politics. It can be kind of extruded from the images, and you know, obviously one has to be very careful not to get. I could get carried away with reading into the painting. I mean, one has to be realistic about the extent to which things can be read. But I do think that they are a magnificent snapshot of young people's attempts, young people growing up in a world that they're trying to make sense of. I mean, we've all done it. We've all been in that position. It's like the world is never cut and dried, finished. It's all, there are things in it, there are things happening in it that we don't understand, that we're trying to make sense of. And I think that runs through the paintings. But
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Bob, are you a philosopher as well?
Um, I don't know to say yes or no to that question. I think we're all anthropologists and we're all philosophers. That's my
Yeah, fascinating. You really stimulated my appetite to go further into this.
all right. Well, perhaps
Okay.
Ruan can put my email up, and if anybody
Yes.
wants to follow up
Oh, please
afterwards,
do, please
I'd be
do.
delighted to enter into a conversation.
We got a question from Devinder. Devinder.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Hi, Bob. Thank
Hey
you
there.
so much. I'm glad I joined the talk today. You really stimulated, like Uncle Mahendra said, about lots of things. I have a comment and a question. My comment is, I was looking at those paintings and I was wondering, as a child, I think I would have been very dismissive or agreed in some, but as an adult now, I really appreciate the detail in those paintings, and your description is perfect. My question is, I think you said you're in retirement now and you picked up this project to be. What actually drove you to take this as a project to be done in your retirement versus there are so many opportunities you probably have had, and why in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think that some friends came round, and they were talking about. She's an artist and she works in material, and in my head I made some connection. So I went and got the paintings and said, "Oh, you might be interested to look at these." And she said, "You must do something with these." And I looked at them, and the idea that I will at some point pass away, and my children will come along and say, "What's all this stuff on top of the wardrobe?" And not have a clue. So what I decided I wanted to do was to start to write about them, which I've done, and then that kind of blossomed a bit. It sort of expanded, and I thought, really, I must return these paintings to Sri Lanka physically, and I've been making inquiries about possibilities of museums or the National Archive as places where they can be physically located for posterity. I don't want to keep them. I don't do that. I want to. The beauty of information technology now is that I have the images, and if I can get them into a book, then that would be brilliant. I can say my piece. I can tell a story, but I want to get the painting back to Sri Lanka to sort of, in a sense, repatriate the paintings. So that and it's just kind of blossomed. I mean, I was able to make contact with the head teacher at the school. The head teacher said that there's one of the staff was actually one of the children who painted the paintings originally. She's so excited. And again, the wonders of modern technology. There's been a colleague from Colombo University who has connections in Martha, and she had relatives up the Nilwala Valley, and she made some preliminary connections. So I can send her the paintings by particular children. She is then able, where those people have got cell phones, to send them the image. And the feedback has been that these people who had no idea that these things existed, being confronted with a painting that they did when they were 9 or 10, has completely blown their minds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I mean, I talk about time travel. Me looking at the paintings, it's me going back to a point in my life when I didn't know what was going to happen in my life, and it's the same for them. They're going back to a point in their life, and as I say, what unfolded in that area in their late teens and their 20s was truly horrific. And I think there was something about being taken back to a childhood before all of that happened. It had quite a profound effect. I mean, I'm just going off the written responses of 10 people, and I want to take it a little bit further. I don't want to get into the horrible detail of it, but I think that there's something quite powerful about what I've done, which is to give them an image that they produced in their childhood, and this has kind of taken them back to a childhood, because it is that that period when they were at school, trouble-free. The world seemed a very simple place. They could be happy, and then just suddenly, life became very, very difficult for them, and for some it was beyond difficult. I mean, in that they didn't survive.
Thank you, Bob. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bob, I got a question as well. I did not read your short biography which you have sent, because you said you want to sort of get on with the speed. But then there's a very interesting thing you have mentioned. One of the main themes of your work seems to be procurement and use of cadaveric tissues.
Yes.
I'm very interested to know what that is about, Bob.
In 2000, I went to Sri Lanka to carry out a pilot project about new reproductive and genetic technologies, which were just beginning to take off there. Clinics were opening, and I was interested in how is this regulated in this context? How are these incredibly powerful technologies which impact upon ideas of kinship and personhood and interpersonal ethics and all this kind of, they were opening up, and as is always the case, they're a little bit ahead of the regulatory machinery to keep pace with things. So this was happening in Sri Lanka, and somebody who you may know, I made contact with Rohan Jayasekara, famous geneticist in Sri Lanka, and his and Harsha Srinivaratna, who was responsible for starting one of the early first clinics in Sri Lanka. And anyway, I was involved with those groups, those sort of networks, and in talking to people about donated gametes and sperm and eggs, people have to make sense of it in some way. And in Sri Lanka, people were sort of saying, well, it's a bit like a dana. It's a bit like blood donation. Blood donation is a bit like a dana. So I went away and I did some research, got very interested in blood donation in Sri Lanka. I've written a few things about blood donation, not the technicalities, but the idea of the gift and the idea of the kind of framing of this as a way of persuading others that it's a good thing to do. And people then started talking about eye donation. I thought this is really interesting. Like we've gone from gametes to blood to eye donation, and ended up doing quite a lot of work with the Sri Lanka Eye Donation Society, Hudson Silver, and all of that. I don't know these people, but incredible. I mean, Sri Lanka as a small nation is vastly outperforms itself in terms of the production internationally of tissue for donation, and this is because it's all tied up with is it the Sievage article where he gives his eyes. What can I give? Well, I can give part of my body. And es his mas lay, that kind of mantra that gets trotted out about the things that can be given in Buddhism. And this is quite a unique kind of idea, that we know about giving our body, our lives in sacrifice. We know about giving material goods in sacrifice. But there are very few religions that actually have explicitly the donation of body materials. So I've written quite a few things about eye donation in Sri Lanka, very, very fascinating topic. And the Eye Donation Society also, when the consent forms are filled out, also includes a section which is about whole body donation for medical education. And again, Sri Lanka is quite unusual because large numbers of people donate their bodies or pledge their bodies to the medical school for donation afterwards. And I think it's Chaika was saying about holding the surgeon's knife. And I remember somebody saying to me, the reason that Sri Lankans are so good at surgery is because they get to practice on cadavers, whereas in the West now it's all done with video and simulation. They don't have the real feel of what it is to dissect a body. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it was very, and certainly there is a kind of an abundance of cadaveric material for medical students to dissect. And I've written a bit about that. I mean, in fact, one of the things that I did just before I retired was put all my essays together into a book, Peripheral Visions, Anthropological Perspectives on Bioethics, Biomedicine, Biotechnology in Sri Lanka. And that is published by the Social Scientists Association. I published it in Sri Lanka because I wanted people there to have access to it. But it's all my essays on biomedicine and biotechnology. So there's the stuff about organ donation, tissue donation is all in there. So if anybody, unfortunately, I don't have any more. Oh, that's my last copy. And I think to get it, you might actually have to order it from the Social Scientists Association in Sri Lanka. But if you're interested, that's where you would find all in one, easily to hand volume.
Thank you for that. Devendra, I thought you had.
Yeah, I did.
Go on. Yeah, go ahead.
Bob, I'm just fascinated how easily you drop singular words in between in your sentences, and you're very comfortable. It's incredible. I don't even see it with Sri Lankans who are comfortable in doing that.
Yeah.
How are you good in languages? Did you spend a notable time in Sri Lanka? How did this happen?
I'm not good in languages, but I did work very hard on Sinhala with a guy called Professor Didi Visaram at Peradeniya, who was a very good teacher. And one of the things that he was very good at was the pronunciation, Nalalabedia and all of that kind of stuff. So it's not just a question of saying the words, but it's where you put the tongue. And I mean, half the time I don't know what I'm saying, but Pahidi. It's clear.
Brilliant.
So mata Sinhala nam 30.
Wow. Bob, just one more thing I wanted to ask you. A book I would strongly recommend you read is 7 Moons of Maria Almeida.
Yeah, I know
Read
it.
it already.
I know it. And I found that such a powerful and disturbing book because, of course, it deals exactly with what the world that those children would have gone through. No, I think that is absolutely brilliant. And I think the other thing that I think is, I mean, I spent a lot of time with the Bhairava, and they live very closely with demons and spirits. And this is a topic for an entirely different session, but it's one that I find really fascinating about the how do you explain the reality that those people feel about those other worlds without actually saying that those other worlds exist, because they're real and they're not real. Yeah, I absolutely believe that when somebody goes into trance, that they are communicating in some way with something that is outside of themselves that doesn't exist. That's the kind of paradox I think is that. And again, to go back to the children's paintings, I think what I mentioned before about causality, and I think that the way that people, it is a sort of almost a kind of a metaphysical question about how people understand unseen forces in the world. How causality? Why is it one thing happens and another? Astrology as an explanatory model. I mean, I knew quite a lot of astrologers back then, and the idea of the Apolakalia, I'm sold on that. I think that works for me. The idea that there are periods where forces out there, you can't do anything about it. But if it's going to go wrong, it'll go wrong. And there are other periods where it goes. Now, I say this to my daughters. Oh, you're in an Apolakalia. Don't worry, it'll come to an end. Rahu is passing through Ketu also.
Bob, another comment is, I've read this lovely piece about where we belong. And it talks about, how you develop a strong bond with platonic relationship with people and a sense of space. I think you probably, even though you're born and brought up in England,
Yeah.
you do have a strong sense of connection with Sri Lanka.
Parapurudukma. No, I agree. I feel very, very at ease and at home with Sri Lankan people and Sri Lankan and the environment there. I do miss it. And one of the things that I think I'm a Mancunian. I come from Manchester, and people from Manchester are allegedly have a good sense of humor, and that's one of the things that I always click into straight away with my Sri Lankan friends is a kind of a zaniness, a sense of humor, a kind of a slightly odd look at the world, and that resonates very strongly with me, I'm sure.
Thank you, Bob.
Mahendra?
Sorry to come again, but it's really based on what we just heard from Devinder about how well you pronounce the Sinhalese language. I mean, that was just struck me when you were presenting how well you do it. The reason I'm saying this is because there's a parallel I want to draw and your attention. There was a famous cricketer who is sadly gone now, but he was a commentator. You know him, Tony, and he used to commentate, and he made a special point to learn how to pronounce the names of the cricketers.
Yeah.
Because he realized that for most individuals, I'm not saying all, most individuals, maybe 99%, if you want to become a good friend of the person, address him the way he likes his name to be pronounced. You immediately make a friend, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's important in a personal relation. Now, Tony Gregg used to say, how do I pronounce your name? Mahela Jawardene? No, it's Mahela Jawardena. Mahela Jawardena. Have I got it right? Yeah, I got it right. And he used to go to extreme lengths to make sure that he pronounced the cricketer's name, because Sinhalese names or even Tamil names are not the easiest, as you know, to pronounce.
No.
But he made a special point to tell the name. So he will never say Jawadeen or Senayaki or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was drawn to immediately the way you pronounce English. And I thought, this chap is, he's special.
No, I think you're absolutely right there. There's nothing worse than having somebody pronounce your name incorrectly. And I found that the rules yeah, sometimes the names are quite long, but the rules of pronunciation are actually very simple. You go long, short, long, short.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing against people who cannot pronounce the language exactly as we do. That's not to be expected. But I think a name is special. When you name a person and identify with that person,
Yeah,
I think it's, to me, it's civilized behavior to find out how to say it, you know.
yeah,
So if you're Simpson, if you call it Simpson or something, I mean, it's respecting you as a
yeah.
person to know how to pronounce your name. But
Just
as far as language goes, I don't care at all. I mean, I sometimes despair some of these Sri Lankan cricketers who are interviewed and they speak in English and they're not conversant with English. They'll be much better off saying, "Look, I speak in Sinhalese and I have a translator." There's
yeah,
nothing low or in esteem to say I can't speak English. It's rubbish. I mean, Putin, our Russian president, he never speaks in English. He speaks in Russian.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add something to Mahendra's point about the names, you see, if you actually look at it, Mahendra, from birth to death, the only thing which remains same is your name, isn't it? Not even a cell from your birth will be there when you're older. So the only thing is your name, and we should make sure that it is pronounced correctly. Anyway, are there any other questions? If not, let's conclude. Now, this is the time when I would like everybody to put on their videos. Let's go to the gallery view. Right. So, Bob, thank you very much for spending a lot of time in speaking to us. And we all really, really enjoyed it. Bob, although you call yourself a Mancunian by birth, I shall declare you as an Ape man. You know, if you know what I mean, Ape means our man, because your pronunciation of in Sinhala and your knowledge about Sri Lanka and your associations with Sri Lanka seems to make you an Ape man. And thank you very much for being here. And we shall show our appreciation in the usual manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure, and I really enjoyed meeting you. And I think my email has gone out there. And if anybody wants to follow up on conversations, I'd be very happy to do that. But thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye then.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank